The sound of a shotgun being cocked echoed across the dusty main street of Willow Creek, Colorado, as Kate Montgomery stood trembling in her ivory wedding gown, torn between the life she was supposed to lead and the one that called to her heart. The year was 1876, and at 18 years of age, she was about to become the reluctant bride of Bartholomew Winston, a land baron whose 50 years on this earth had done little to temper his ruthlessness. "Step away from her," a deep voice commanded, cutting through the shocked murmurs of the wedding guests who had spilled out of the church to witness the commotion. Lucas Blackwood sat atop his chestnut stallion, his blue eyes narrowed against the afternoon sun, one hand holding the reins, the other resting on the revolver at his hip. "She's coming with me," Lucas declared, his voice carrying across the crowd that had gathered to witness what should have been the wedding of the year. Bartholomew's face contorted with rage as he reached for Kate's arm, his fingers digging into her flesh through the delicate lace of her sleeve. "This woman is my bride, Cowboy," Bartholomew spat. "The contract is signed. Her father's debts are paid. You have no claim here." Kate's eyes darted between the two men, one who represented security but demanded her soul as payment, and the other who offered freedom but risked everything she knew. She had only met Lucas Blackwood 3 times since he'd arrived in town a month ago, but each encounter had left her breathless, awakening feelings she tried to bury beneath duty and obligation. "Kate," Lucas said, his voice softening as he addressed her directly, "I'm not forcing you, but I'm offering you a choice." He extended his hand toward her, his calloused palm open in invitation. "You don't have to do this." For a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. Kate could feel the weight of every stare, hear the disapproving whispers, sense her father's panic at the thought of Bartholomew's wrath should the wedding be called off. The debt that had forced this arrangement hung over her family like a guillotine blade. "You ungrateful girl," her father hissed from behind her. "Think of your mother, your sisters. Where will we go if Mr. Winston withdraws his protection?" Kate closed her eyes, the burden of responsibility crushing her chest. When she opened them again, her gaze locked with Lucas's, and in that moment, she saw something she'd never expected to find in Willow Creek Hope. With a surge of courage that surprised even herself, Kate pulled free from Bartholomew's grasp. Her heart pounding against her ribs, she gathered her skirts and took a step forward, then another, until she stood at the edge of the church steps. "I cannot marry you, Mr. Winston," she said, her voice surprisingly steady. "I am sorry for any pain this causes, but I will not sell myself, even to save my family." Bartholomew's face darkened dangerously. "Joseph," he barked to his foreman, "restrain her." But before Joseph could move, Lucas had dismounted, his movement fluid and purposeful. "Anyone who touches her answers to me," he warned, the steel in his voice matching the determination in his stance. Kate descended the remaining steps, her wedding dress trailing in the dust of the street. She knew what she was giving up: security, position, the chance to save her family from ruin. But as she approached Lucas, something told her that what lay ahead, uncertain as it was, held more promise than the gilded cage Bartholomew offered. "You'll regret this," Bartholomew called after her. "Both of you. No one crosses me in my own town." Lucas helped Kate onto his horse, her wedding dress billowing around them like a cloud. "Hold on tight," he murmured, swinging up behind her. The warmth of his chest against her back was both terrifying and exhilarating. As they galloped away from the church, leaving behind a wake of scandalized gasps and one furious land baron, Kate felt a wild, unexpected freedom surge through her veins. She had no idea where they were going or what would become of her family, but for the first time in months, She was following her heart instead of her father's desperate calculations. "Where are we going?" she shouted over the thundering hoofbeats. Lucas leaned close, his breath warm against her ear. "Somewhere safe. I promise you that, Kate. Whatever happens, you won't face it alone." The promise settled in her chest, a tiny seed of trust taking root. She didn't know this man, not really, but something about him called to her in a way no one ever had before. As the town of Willow Creek grew smaller behind them, Kate Montgomery realized she had just traded one uncertain future for another, but this one, at least, she had chosen for herself. The open plains stretched before them, bathed in the golden light of late afternoon. Kate held tight to the saddle horn, the wind whipping her carefully arranged hair into tangles and carrying away the orange blossoms that had been woven into her curls. Each mile put between them and Willow Creek was both a relief and a new worry. "My family," she said suddenly, the realization of what she'd done hitting her fully. "Bartholomew will ruin them." Lucas slowed the horse to a more sustainable pace. "Your father's the blacksmith, right?" "Joseph Montgomery," Kate nodded, though he couldn't see her face. "Yes, we've been struggling since my mother fell ill 2 winters ago. The medical bills. And then the drought affected everyone's livestock. Fewer horses meant less work." The shame of her family's situation burned in her throat. "Bartholomew offered to clear all our debts and provide for my mother's care if I would marry him. And your father agreed to this bargain." There was a hard edge to Lucas's question. He thought he was doing what was best," Kate defended, though the words sounded hollow even to her own ears. "Bartholomew owns half the county. The bank, the largest ranch, most of the businesses in town lease from him. My father felt there was no choice." Lucas was quiet for a long moment. "There's always a choice, Kate. Sometimes none of them are good, but there's always a choice." They rode in silence for a while, the rhythm of the horse's gait lulling Kate into a strange calm despite the chaos of the day. The reality of her situation began to settle around her. She had fled her own wedding, leaving scandal in her wake. She had no money, no possessions beyond the wedding dress she wore, and she was alone with a man she barely knew, heading into the wilderness. "We'll reach my friend's place before nightfall," Lucas said eventually. "Emma and her husband have a small ranch about 15 miles outside of town. They'll give us shelter while we figure out what to do next." "Why did you do it?" Kate asked suddenly. "Why risk Bartholomew's wrath for me? You hardly know me." Lucas slowed the horse to a walk, allowing him to turn slightly in the saddle to look at her. His blue eyes were serious, his expression unreadable. "I've seen men like Winston before," he said quietly. "Men who collect people like they collect land and cattle as possessions to be used and discarded. When I saw you in town that first day, delivering mending to the hotel, you had light in your eyes despite everything. Then I watched that light dim a little more each time I saw you, as the wedding drew closer." He looked away, scanning the horizon. "I couldn't stand by and watch it go out completely." The simple honesty in his words touched something deep within Kate. "You notice that?" A small smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "I notice a lot of things, Kate Montgomery. Including how you stood up to Widow Perkins when she tried to cheat that young Mexican family at the general store. Not many in Willow Creek would have done that." Kate felt her cheeks flush with the memory. They didn't speak much English. She was counting on their confusion. "And you stepped in, despite knowing she's one of Winston's oldest friends." Lucas nodded. "That takes courage, or foolishness," Kate murmured. "Sometimes they're the same thing." Lucas urged the horse forward again. "Rest if you can. We've got a ways to go yet." Kate leaned back slightly, allowing herself to be supported by his steady presence. The enormity of what she had done still hadn't fully registered. She had been raised to be practical, to understand that marriage was often more about alliance and security than affection. Her mother had always told her that love could grow from respect and kindness, given time. But there had been nothing of respect or kindness in Bartholomew Winston's cold appraisal of her. He had toured her father's forge with the air of a man assessing livestock, his eyes lingering too long on Kate as she served coffee, his questions about her education and temperament making it clear that he saw her as little more than a decorative addition to his household, one expected to provide him with an heir. The sun was beginning to set when they crested a hill, and Kate caught sight of a modest homestead nestled in a small valley. Smoke rose from the chimney, and a few cattle grazed in a nearby pasture. After the tension of the day, the peaceful scene brought unexpected tears to Kate's eyes. As they approached, a woman emerged from the house, wiping her hands on her apron. She was perhaps 30, with auburn hair pulled back in a practical bun and a face that looked accustomed to smiling, though at the moment her expression was one of surprise. "Lucas Blackwood, what on earth?" she called as they drew closer. Her eyes widened as she took in Kate's bedraggled wedding gown. "Oh my, I think you'd better come inside and explain yourself." Lucas dismounted and reached up to help Kate down. Her legs felt unsteady after the long ride, and the weight of her dress, now dirty and torn at the hem, nearly pulled her off balance. Lucas caught her elbow, steadying her with a gentle touch. "Emma, this is Katherine Montgomery," he said. "Kate, this is Emma Carson, one of the few people in this world I trust with my life." Emma's eyebrows rose even higher. Montgomery, Joseph's daughter, the one who was supposed to be marrying Bartholomew Winston today. Her gaze sharpened as she looked between them. "Lucas, tell me you didn't." "He didn't force me," Kate said quickly. "I chose to leave." Emma studied her for a long moment, then nodded decisively. "Well, whatever the story is, you look dead on your feet, and this isn't a conversation for the yard. Come inside. I've got stew on the stove, and you look like you could use a hot meal and some proper clothes." She turned toward the house, then paused to call over her shoulder. "Lucas, see to your horse, then come in through the back. And prepare yourself, Charlie's going to have plenty to say about this." As Emma led her into the small but tidy home, Kate felt the last of her composure beginning to crumble. The kindness in the older woman's manner, after the turmoil of the day, was almost more than she could bear. "I'm sorry to bring trouble to your door," she managed to say as Emma guided her to a chair at the kitchen table. "Trouble finds its way without invitation," Emma replied pragmatically. She poured a cup of coffee and set it before Kate. "Drink this while I find you something more practical to wear. That dress is beautiful, but it's hardly suited for ranch life." Left alone in the warm kitchen, Kate curled her fingers around the mug and tried to make sense of the day's events. She had woken this morning resigned to her fate, prepared to do her duty to her family. Now she sat in a stranger's home, miles from everything familiar, with nothing to her name and an uncertain future stretching before her. And yet, despite everything, she could not bring herself to regret her decision. For the first time in months, she could breathe without the weight of dread pressing down on her chest. Through the window, she could see Lucas caring for his horse, his movements efficient and gentle. He was tall and lean, with the kind of strength that came from work rather than leisure. His dark hair curled slightly at the nape of his neck, and even from a distance, there was something compelling about the way he carried himself, a quiet confidence that didn't need to announce itself. Kate had first noticed him in town 4 weeks ago, when he'd stepped in to break up a fight outside the saloon. What had impressed her wasn't his ability to subdue the brawlers, but the way he'd diffused the situation without humiliating either man, even helping the drunker of the two back to his feet with a word of advice rather than condemnation. Their second meeting had been at the general store, where Kate had indeed intervened when Widow Perkins tried to overcharge the Mendez family for basic supplies. Lucas had been browsing the tools section, but had watched the exchange with evident approval. Afterward, he'd tipped his hat to her as they passed on the boardwalk, a gesture of respect that had warmed her more than it should have. Their third and most meaningful encounter had been just 3 days ago, at the creek where Kate had gone to gather wildflowers for her wedding bouquet, a task she'd volunteered for just to have a few hours of solitude before her life changed forever. Lucas had been watering his horse downstream and had approached when he recognized her. "Miss Montgomery," he'd greeted her, keeping a respectful distance. "Those are pretty flowers." "Thank you, Mr. Blackwood," she'd replied, surprised he knew her name. "They're for my wedding on Saturday." Something had flickered in his eyes, then concern, perhaps, or something deeper. "Are you happy about this marriage, if you don't mind my asking?" The directness of the question had startled her. People in Willow Creek didn't speak so plainly about such matters, especially not to young women they barely knew. Yet instead of being offended, Kate had found herself answering honestly. "Happiness isn't really the point," she'd said. "It's a good match for my family. Mr. Winston is established." Lucas had nodded slowly. "And what about you? What's good for Katherine Montgomery?" No one had asked her that before, not her father, not her friends, not even herself. The question had unlocked something inside her, a yearning she tried to bury beneath duty and practicality. "I don't know," she'd admitted. "I've never had the luxury of finding out." They'd talked for nearly an hour after that, about everything and nothing: books they'd read, places they'd seen or hoped to see, the changing seasons and what they meant in different parts of the country. It was the most honest conversation Kate had had in years, and when they finally parted ways, she'd felt both lighter and heavier. Lighter for having spoken her mind, heavier for knowing it changed nothing about her circumstances. Or so she had thought. The back door opened, pulling Kate from her memories as Lucas entered the kitchen, removing his hat as he crossed the threshold. Their eyes met across the room, and something unspoken passed between them, an acknowledgement of the day's events and the uncertain path ahead. "Emma's husband will be back soon," he said, taking a seat across from her. "Charlie's a good man, but he's cautious by nature. He'll have questions." Kate nodded, wrapping her fingers more tightly around the coffee mug. "I have some myself." She met his gaze directly. "Starting with who you really are, Lucas Blackwood, and why you would risk making an enemy of the most powerful man in the county for a blacksmith's daughter you barely know." Before Lucas could answer, Emma returned with a bundle of clothing. "These should fit you well enough for now," she said, placing them on the table. "The bedroom's through there if you want to change." She glanced between Kate and Lucas, seeming to sense the tension in the air. "Whatever you two need to discuss can wait until you're more comfortable, I imagine." Kate took the clothes gratefully and retreated to the small bedroom Emma had indicated. As she struggled with the buttons of her wedding dress, her mind raced with questions. Lucas Blackwood was clearly more than the drifting cowboy he appeared to be. No ordinary ranch hand would dare challenge Bartholomew Winston or have the resources to help her escape. The borrowed dress was simple but clean, a practical blue calico that fit her reasonably well, though Emma was slightly taller. Kate twisted her hair into a simple knot at the nape of her neck, using the pins she salvaged from her elaborate wedding coiffure. When she looked in the small mirror hanging on the wall, a stranger stared back at her, a woman on the cusp of a new life, terrified but determined. By the time she returned to the kitchen, a man had joined Lucas and Emma at the table. He rose when Kate entered, revealing himself to be a tall, broad-shouldered figure with a weathered face and kind eyes. "Miss Montgomery," he said with a nod. "I'm Charles Carson. Welcome to our home." "Thank you for your hospitality, Mr. Carson," Kate replied, taking the seat Emma indicated. "I understand this is an unusual situation." Charles exchanged a look with his wife. "That's putting it mildly. Lucas has been explaining what happened in town today." He shook his head. "Bartholomew Winston isn't a man who forgets a slight. He'll be looking for both of you." "Which is why we can't stay long," Lucas said. "Just tonight to rest and make a plan." "And what exactly is the plan?" Emma asked, serving bowls of stew with efficient movements. "You've rescued the damsel, Lucas. Now what?" Kate bristled slightly at being called a damsel but held her tongue. These people were offering help at considerable risk to themselves. Lucas ran a hand through his hair, a gesture Kate was beginning to recognize as a sign of his thinking deeply. "Kate needs to get far from Winston's reach. I have connections in Denver who can help her find work, somewhere to stay." "And what about her family?" Charles asked. "Winston won't take kindly to being jilted. He's likely to take his anger out on the Montgomerys." The thought sent a chill through Kate. "My father may have made a terrible bargain, but my mother and sisters shouldn't suffer for my actions." "Or for his," Lucas added firmly. He turned to Kate. "I have some money saved, not a fortune, but enough to help your family relocate if necessary." Kate stared at him, astonished. "Why would you do that? You don't owe us anything." "Let's just say I have my reasons for wanting to see Bartholomew Winston knock down a peg," Lucas replied, his expression hardening briefly before he softened it with a small smile. "Besides, I'm the one who encouraged you to follow your heart. I can't in good conscience leave your family to face the consequences alone." "You still haven't told me who you really are," Kate pointed out, "or why you have such an interest in thwarting Mr. Winston." The three adults exchanged glances, and Kate had the distinct impression they were deciding how much to tell her. Finally, Lucas sighed. "I used to be a Pinkerton agent," he admitted. "I left the agency 2 years ago, but I still do occasional work for them on a freelance basis. I came to Willow Creek because there have been reports of land fraud throughout the territory, ranchers and farmers being forced off their property through dubious legal means or outright intimidation. And you suspect Bartholomew is behind it," Kate concluded, pieces falling into place. "That's how he's expanded his holdings so quickly." Lucas nodded. "I've been gathering evidence. Winston's smart, he keeps his hands clean, uses intermediaries for the dirty work, but patterns emerge if you know what to look for." "The Hendersons," Kate murmured, remembering the elderly couple who had lost their small ranch the previous year after a suspicious fire destroyed their home and barn. "And the Wilsons before them." "Exactly." Lucas leaned forward. "Winston creates situations where people become desperate, then offers them a way out that ultimately benefits him. Your father's situation fits the pattern." Kate felt sick. "Are you saying he deliberately targeted my family, that our troubles weren't just bad luck?" "I can't prove it," Lucas admitted. "But the timing of your mother's illness and the sudden drop in your father's business is suspicious. Winston has been without a wife for 3 years now. He needs an heir, and you're young, educated, and from a respectable family, fallen on hard times, exactly the sort of situation he exploits." The idea that her family's suffering might have been orchestrated made Kate's blood run cold. She thought of her mother's mysterious illness that had confounded the local doctor, the sudden cancellation of orders from ranchers who had used her father's services for years. "If what you're saying is true," she said slowly, "then my leaving today won't end it. He'll just find another way to pressure my father." "Unless we can prove what he's been doing," Lucas countered. "That's why I came to Willow Creek, to build a case against him." "And Kate happened to be a convenient distraction?" Emma asked, her tone making it clear she didn't approve. Lucas's eyes flashed with anger. It wasn't like that. I didn't plan to interfere with the wedding, but when I saw her standing there. He turned to Kate, his expression softening. I couldn't let it happen, not when I knew what kind of man he is. Kate studied him, trying to separate truth from convenient explanation. So what happens now? You use me to get close to Bartholomew somehow. No, Lucas said firmly. Now we get you somewhere safe, help your family if they need it, and I continue my investigation. Your only part in this is to stay out of Winston's reach. That seems rather passive, Kate observed, especially since I appear to be in the center of it already. Charles cleared his throat. It's getting late and you both have had a long day. Perhaps this discussion can wait until morning when cooler heads prevail. Emma nodded in agreement. Charlie's right. Kate, you can take the spare bedroom. Lucas, you know where the barn is. As the evening wound down, Kate found herself guided back to the small bedroom she'd changed in earlier. Emma provided a nightgown and some basic toiletries, her manner kind but reserved. Thank you, Kate said as Emma turned to leave, for taking us in. I know it puts you at risk. Emma paused in the doorway. Lucas saved Charlie's life once, years ago. We owe him more than we can repay. She hesitated, then added, He's a good man, Kate, one of the best I've known. But he carries burdens you can't see. What kind of burdens? That's his story to tell if he chooses. Emma's expression softened. Just be careful with your heart. These next few days won't be easy for either of you. After Emma left, Kate sat on the edge of the bed, her mind whirling with the day's revelations. She had fled one danger only to find herself in the middle of something much larger and potentially more dangerous. Lucas Blackwood was not simply a knight in dusty cowboy attire, but a man with a mission, one that had somehow expanded to include her. The question that kept returning to her as she finally lay down to sleep was whether his concern for her was genuine or merely convenient to his larger purpose. And more troubling still, why did the answer matter so much to her after only a single day? Outside in the barn, Lucas Blackwood spread his bedroll in an empty stall, his body tired but his mind too active for sleep. He hadn't planned to intervene in Kate's wedding. His investigation required discretion and patience, neither of which was served by publicly challenging the most powerful man in the county. But seeing her standing there in that white dress, her face a mask of resignation as she prepared to sacrifice herself for her family's security, something had broken loose inside him. It was too familiar, too reminiscent of another young woman who had been used as a pawn in a powerful man's game, his sister, Sarah, whose marriage to a wealthy banker had ended in tragedy 3 years earlier. Lucas had been too late to save Sarah from a husband whose charming public face had hidden a monster. By the time he discovered the truth about Thomas Whitfield's abusive nature, Sarah had already taken her own life, unable to endure another day of torment. The official investigation had been cursory, Whitfield's wealth and connections ensuring that a verdict of melancholia was recorded rather than the truth. It was this injustice that had led Lucas to leave the Pinkertons and pursue justice on his own terms, tracking down men like Whitfield, who used their power to control and destroy others. Bartholomew Winston had first come to his attention through newspaper reports of suspicious land acquisitions in Colorado Territory. The pattern was familiar financial pressure applied to vulnerable families, followed by apparently generous offers of assistance that ultimately resulted in Winston gaining property or other assets at far below their value. Coming to Willow Creek, Lucas had intended only to gather evidence. He hadn't expected to become personally involved, especially not with one of Winston's potential victims. Kate Montgomery was supposed to be just another name in his investigation, not a woman whose courage and integrity had impressed him from their first meeting. Now she was deeply entangled in his mission, and he had made promises he wasn't sure he could keep. Getting her safely away from Winston was just the first challenge. Ensuring her family's security and continuing his investigation while protecting both Kate and the Carsons would require resources and allies he wasn't sure he had. As he finally drifted toward sleep, Lucas acknowledged the truth he'd been avoiding. His decision to rescue Kate hadn't been entirely altruistic. There was something about her quiet strength, her compassion for others despite her own troubles, the way her green eyes lit up during their conversation by the creek that had gotten under his skin in a way no woman had since before Sarah's death. And that attraction made her a vulnerability he couldn't afford, both for his mission and for his carefully guarded heart. Dawn broke over the Carson ranch with the soft golden light of early summer. Kate woke disoriented, the unfamiliar room confusing her until memory flooded back the wedding, Lucas's intervention, their escape from town. She dressed quickly in the borrowed clothes, grateful for their practicality after months of preparing the elaborate wardrobe Bartholomew had insisted upon for his bride. When she entered the kitchen, she found Emma already at work preparing breakfast, the smell of coffee and biscuits filling the air. "Good morning," Emma greeted her. "Sleep well, better than I expected," Kate admitted. "Is there something I can help with?" Emma handed her a bowl of eggs. "You can scramble these while I finish the biscuits. Charlie's already out checking the cattle and Lucas is tending to the horses." As they worked side by side, Kate ventured a question that had been on her mind since the previous evening. "How do you know Lucas?" Emma smiled slightly. Charlie and Lucas served together during the war, both fought for the Union. Afterward, Lucas joined the Pinkertons while Charlie tried his hand at ranching in Kansas. When drought hit us hard in '71, Lucas helped us relocate here. She glanced at Kate. "He doesn't make friends easily, but those he has, he'd die for." "He mentioned his sister last night," Kate said carefully. "That something happened to her." Emma's hand stilled briefly. "Sarah, yes, that's not my story to tell, but it changed him. Before he was lighter, I suppose. More willing to see the good in people." She shook her head. "The Lucas you know is carrying ghosts." Before Kate could ask more, the back door opened and Lucas entered, bringing with him the scent of morning air and horses. He paused when he saw Kate, something flickering in his eyes before he masked it with a polite smile. "Morning," he said, removing his hat. "Hope you slept well." "I did, thank you." Kate turned back to the eggs, suddenly unsure of herself. In the harsh light of day, the impulse that had led her to leave with him seemed reckless, almost foolish. What did she really know about this man, beyond his apparent opposition to Bartholomew Winston? Breakfast was a quiet affair, with Charles returning just as Emma was putting the food on the table. The conversation remained carefully neutral until the meal was finished, when Charles cleared his throat. "I rode out to the North Ridge this morning," he said, his expression grave. "Could see dust from riders heading this way from town. Not close yet, but they're coming in this direction." Lucas's jaw tightened. "Winston's men, sooner than I expected." "We need to move," Charles agreed. "They likely know you're friendly with us, Lucas. This would be a natural place to search." "I'll saddle the horses," Lucas said, rising from the table. "Kate, gather only what you absolutely need. We need to be gone within the hour." As he strode from the room, Kate turned to Emma. "I've brought this trouble to your door. I'm so sorry." Emma waved away the apology. "Winston's had his eye on our water rights for years. This was coming one way or another." She stood and went to a cabinet, returning with a small bundle. "Here, some food for the journey, a change of clothes, and a few other necessities. "Where will you go?" Kate asked. "Charlie has a cousin in Wyoming with a larger spread. We've been considering joining him for some time. This just accelerates the plan." Emma's practical manner belied the seriousness of the situation. "Don't worry about us. Focus on staying ahead of Winston's men." Kate helped clean up from breakfast, then changed into the riding clothes. Emma provided a split skirt and sturdy blouse that would allow her to ride astride rather than side saddle. By the time she emerged from the bedroom, Lucas was waiting in the yard with 3 saddled horses. "3?" she questioned. "Charlie's coming with us part of the way," Lucas explained. "He knows the back trails better than I do. We'll separate once we're in the mountains." Kate turned to Emma, who stood on the porch, her face composed despite the circumstances. "I don't know how to thank you." "Live well," Emma replied simply. "And perhaps when this is all over, write to let us know you're safe." She embraced Kate briefly. "Be careful, both of you." Charles helped Kate mount a gentle-looking bay mare, then swung up onto his own horse. Lucas checked the cinch on his saddle one last time before mounting as well. With a final nod to Emma, the 3 riders set off, not toward the main road but across the pasture toward a line of trees that marked the beginning of more rugged terrain. They rode in silence for the first hour, moving at a steady pace that ate up the miles without exhausting the horses. Kate, who had learned to ride as a child but had few opportunities in recent years, found her body remembering the rhythm, though she knew she would be sore by day's end. As they entered more wooded country, Charles finally broke the silence. "Winston's men will expect you to head for Denver or one of the other large settlements. Most fugitives seek anonymity in crowds." "But we're not going to Denver?" Kate asked, looking to Lucas. He shook his head. "Not directly. I have a cabin about 3 days' ride from here up in the mountains. It's remote, hard to find unless you know it's there. We'll lay low for a while, then decide our next move." "And my family? How will they know I'm safe?" Lucas exchanged a glance with Charles. "Charlie's going to split off soon and head for town. He'll get word to your father discreetly and help them prepare to leave if necessary." Kate frowned. "That's too dangerous. Bartholomew will be watching our house." "Which is why Charlie won't go directly there," Lucas explained. "He'll contact your father at the forge, through intermediaries if needed." "I've done this kind of thing before, Miss Montgomery," Charles assured her. "During the war and after, messages can be passed without raising suspicion if you know how." They rode on, the terrain growing steeper and more challenging. Kate's city-bred muscles protested, but she kept pace without complaint, aware that every mile put between them and Willow Creek increased their safety. Around midday, they paused in a small clearing to rest the horses and eat some of the provisions Emma had packed. Kate stretched her legs, wincing at the stiffness in her thighs and back. "It gets easier," Lucas said, noticing her discomfort. "By the 3rd day, you'll feel like you were born in the saddle." "If I can still walk by then," Kate replied with a rueful smile. Charles, who had been scanning the horizon with a small spyglass, rejoined them. "No sign of pursuit yet, but we should keep moving. I'll leave you at Cottonwood Creek. From there, the trail gets tricky better if I'm not there to witness exactly which path you take." "Plausible deniability," Lucas nodded. "Smart." They remounted and continued their journey, the forest growing denser around them. Kate found herself marveling at the beauty of the landscape, the towering pines, the glimpses of distant mountains, the occasional flash of wildlife. Despite the circumstances, there was something exhilarating about this journey, about moving through this wild country with purpose and direction. By late afternoon, they reached a swift-flowing stream that Charles identified as Cottonwood Creek. The spot where they stopped was marked by a massive old tree, its trunk scarred by lightning but still very much alive. "This is where we part ways," Charles said, dismounting. He approached Kate's horse and looked up at her seriously. "Trust Lucas. He knows what he's doing even when it doesn't seem like it." "Thank you for everything," Kate replied. "Please be careful when you return." Charles nodded, then turned to Lucas. The two men clasped forearms in a gesture that spoke of deep history and trust. "Watch your back," Charles said. "Winston has resources we may not know about." "I always do," Lucas assured him. "Get the Montgomerys out if you can. Use the money in my saddlebag if needed." With a final nod, Charles mounted his horse and turned back the way they had come, though Kate noticed he chose a slightly different path than the one they had followed. "Where exactly is this cabin?" she asked as Charles disappeared among the trees. Lucas checked his pocket watch before answering. "About 20 miles northwest of here as the crow flies, but the way is complicated. We'll need to take our time, especially with the light fading." "Will we reach it tonight?" He shook his head. "No. We'll make camp once we've put a few more miles behind us. There's a spot I know that offers good protection and clean water." As they rode on, the forest grew denser, the trail less defined. Lucas seemed to navigate by landmarks only he could recognize a particular configuration of rocks, a tree with an unusual growth pattern, a subtle change in the terrain. Kate found herself impressed by his woodcraft and increasingly aware of how dependent she was on his knowledge and skills. The sun was beginning to set when Lucas finally led them into a small clearing partially enclosed by a rocky outcropping. A stream burbled nearby, providing both water and a pleasant background noise that would help mask any sounds they made. "We'll stop here for the night," he said, dismounting and coming around to help Kate down from her horse. "It's defensible and hidden from the main trail." Kate's legs nearly buckled when her feet touched the ground, unused to the long hours in the saddle. Lucas caught her elbow, steadying her, and for a moment they stood close enough that she could feel the warmth of him, smell the leather and pine scent that clung to his clothes. "Thank you," she murmured, pulling away perhaps too quickly. "What can I do to help make camp?" Lucas seemed to gather himself. "You can collect some firewood while I see to the horses. Nothing too large, just small branches and twigs for a modest fire. We don't want a blaze that can be seen from a distance." Kate nodded and began gathering suitable wood from the edge of the clearing, grateful for the simple task that allowed her to stretch her muscles and organize her thoughts. The reality of her situation was beginning to sink in fully. She was miles from civilization, alone with a man she barely knew, fleeing from one of the most powerful men in the territory. Her family's fate was uncertain, and her own future was a blank page. Yet strangely, she felt more alive than she had in months. The constant dread that had accompanied her engagement to Bartholomew was gone, replaced by a different kind of tension, the immediate concerns of survival and escape, rather than the slow suffocation she had faced as Winston's wife. By the time she returned to the center of the clearing with an armload of wood, Lucas had unsaddled the horses and set up a small camp. He took the wood from her and efficiently built a small fire, shielding it partially with rocks to direct the heat inward and minimize the visible light. "Are you hungry?" he asked, rummaging in one of the saddlebags. "Starving, actually," Kate admitted. The morning's breakfast seemed a distant memory. Lucas produced some jerky, hardtack, and dried apples, trail food, but welcome nonetheless. They ate in companionable silence as the light faded from the sky, revealing a canopy of stars overhead. "It's beautiful," Kate said, gazing upward. "In town, you never see so many stars." Lucas followed her gaze. "One of the things I love about being in the wilderness. Reminds you how small our problems really are in the grand scheme of things." "Do you really believe that?" Kate asked. "That our problems are small?" He considered the question seriously. "Not small to us, no, but the stars have seen empires rise and fall. They'll still be shining long after Bartholomew Winston is dust." He glanced at her. "That's a comfort sometimes. A cold one," Kate observed. Lucas smiled slightly. "Perhaps, but I'll take comfort where I can find it." He stoked the fire gently. "You should try to sleep. I'll take first watch." "You expect trouble tonight?" "I always expect trouble," he replied, and Kate sensed it wasn't an exaggeration. "It's kept me alive this long." Kate hesitated, then asked the question that had been on her mind all day. "Your sister. Emma mentioned something happened to her." Lucas went still, his face hardening in the firelight. For a moment, Kate thought he wouldn't answer. "Sarah married a man like Winston," he finally said, his voice low. "Wealthy, respected, powerful. A man who cultivated an impeccable public image while being a monster in private." He poked at the fire, sending sparks upward. "By the time I discovered what was happening, it was too late. She took her own life rather than endure another day with him." "I'm so sorry," Kate whispered. "The worst part wasn't just losing her," Lucas continued, as if compelled to speak now that he had started. "It was the knowledge that her death changed nothing. Her husband remarried within a year, to another young woman from a family in financial distress." The pattern continued. His eyes, when they met Kate's, were filled with old pain and newer resolve. "That's why I couldn't stand by and watch you marry Winston. I've seen this story before. I couldn't bear to see it play out again." The raw honesty in his voice touched Kate deeply. "Thank you for telling me," she said softly, "and for what you did today. Whatever happens next, I'm grateful for the choice you gave me." Lucas nodded, some of the tension easing from his shoulders. "You should rest. Tomorrow will be another long day." Kate settled onto the bedroll he had prepared for her, pulling a blanket around her shoulders against the mountain chill. Despite the hard ground and unfamiliar surroundings, exhaustion pulled at her, and she found herself drifting toward sleep more easily than she would have expected. The last thing she remembered before sleep claimed her was the silhouette of Lucas against the starry sky, his vigilant presence both reassuring and somehow lonely. She woke once in the night, disoriented and cold despite the blanket. The fire had burned down to embers, casting just enough light for her to make out Lucas's form still seated on a rock at the edge of the clearing, his rifle across his knees. As if sensing her gaze, he turned slightly. "Go back to sleep," he said softly. "Everything's quiet." Kate nodded and pulled the blanket tighter. "Shouldn't you rest too, soon?" he promised. "I'm used to long nights." There was something profoundly comforting about his watchfulness, Kate reflected as she drifted back to sleep. For all the uncertainty that lay ahead, in this moment she felt safer than she had in months. The next day dawned clear and cool, with dew sparkling on every surface. Kate woke to find Lucas already up, the horses saddled and a small breakfast laid out on a flat rock beside a freshly stoked fire. "You should have woken me," she said, sitting up and brushing her hair back from her face. "I could have helped." "You needed the rest," he replied, handing her a cup of coffee. "Besides, I'm used to moving camp efficiently." Kate accepted the coffee gratefully, its warmth and bitterness helping to clear the fog of sleep. "Did you rest at all?" "Enough," he said with a small shrug that suggested otherwise. "We should eat quickly and get moving. I want to cover as much ground as possible before midday." They ate a simple meal of jerky and hardtack, then doused the fire and erased as many signs of their presence as possible. Within half an hour of waking, Kate found herself back in the saddle, following Lucas deeper into the mountains. The terrain grew increasingly challenging as they ascended, the trail sometimes narrowing to a barely visible track that wound between massive boulders or along steep slopes. Kate's respect for Lucas's navigational skills grew with each passing hour without him. She would have been hopelessly lost in this wilderness. "How did you find this cabin we're heading to?" she asked during a brief rest to water the horses at a small spring. "It belonged to an old trapper named Mackenzie," Lucas explained. "I did him a favor once, and when he decided to move back east to live with his daughter, he gave me the location. Said he'd rather someone who appreciated solitude have it than see it fall into ruin." "And you appreciate solitude?" Kate asked, studying him. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "More than most, though I'm not always lucky enough to find it." They continued their journey, the landscape growing more dramatic with each mile, towering cliffs, deep valleys, forests that seemed untouched by human presence. Despite the physical discomfort of the ride and the constant awareness of pursuit, Kate found herself moved by the raw beauty surrounding them. By late afternoon, Lucas led them into a narrow valley sheltered by steep ridges on three sides. At the far end, nestled against the base of a cliff and partially hidden by pines, stood a small log cabin. It was rugged but solidly built with a stone chimney and a small covered porch. "Mackenzie's place," Lucas announced as they approached. "Home, at least for now." He dismounted and helped Kate down, then led the horses to a small lean-to shelter at the side of the cabin. Kate stretched her aching muscles and approached the cabin, curious about this place that would be their sanctuary. The interior was simple but surprisingly comfortable, a main room with a stone fireplace, rough-hewn table and chairs, and shelves stocked with basic provisions. A doorway led to a smaller room that contained a bed frame with a straw mattress. Everything was dusty, but otherwise well-maintained. Mackenzie was a firm believer in being prepared, Lucas explained as he brought in their saddlebags. He kept this place stocked with enough supplies to last through winter, just in case. Most of it's still good flour, beans, coffee, dried meat. "It's wonderful," Kate said sincerely. The cabin, for all its simplicity, represented safety, a place to catch her breath and plan her next steps. Lucas busied himself lighting a fire in the fireplace and checking the cabin's supplies while Kate, eager to be useful, began sweeping out the dust and cobwebs. They worked in companionable silence, the physical tasks a welcome distraction from the uncertainties that loomed beyond this temporary haven. As dusk approached, Lucas prepared a simple but hearty meal of beans, jerky, and biscuits made from the stored flour. Kate set the table with the cabin's mismatched plates and utensils, and for a moment, the domestic scene struck her as surreal, two fugitives playing at normalcy in a hidden mountain cabin. "What are you thinking?" Lucas asked, noticing her pause. Kate smiled slightly. "That this is nothing like what I expected my life to be 2 days ago. Regrets?" His tone was casual, but she sensed the weight behind the question. "No," she said firmly. "Though I do worry about my family, especially my mother. Her health is fragile." Lucas nodded. "Charlie will make sure they're taken care of. He's resourceful and knows how to move people discreetly if needed." They ate by firelight, the dancing flames casting warm shadows around the cabin. Outside, the wind had picked up, sighing through the pines and rattling the shutters. "Storm coming," Lucas observed, glancing toward the window. "Good timing. Rain will wash away any tracks we left." "How long can we stay here?" Kate asked. Lucas considered the question. "A week, maybe 2, long enough to let the immediate search die down. Winston will have men watching the roads to Denver and the other large settlements, but his resources aren't unlimited. Eventually, he'll have to scale back." "And then what? Where do I go?" "That depends," Lucas said carefully, "on what you want and on how things develop with Winston. I have friends in several cities who could help you start fresh: Denver, San Francisco, even Chicago." The enormity of the change facing her settled on Kate's shoulders. "I've never been outside Colorado territory," she said softly. "The idea of going so far alone is daunting." "You wouldn't be entirely alone," Lucas assured her. "I'd make sure you had connections, support." "But not you," Kate said, the words escaping before she could consider them. Lucas's eyes met hers across the table, something unreadable flickering in their depths. "My path isn't one that allows for attachments. The work I do, the people I pursue, it's not a life I'd ask anyone to share." "I wasn't asking," Kate said quickly, feeling heat rise in her cheeks. "I just meant I know what you meant," Lucas interrupted gently, "and I'm not dismissing it. But right now, our priority has to be your safety." The moment stretched between them, filled with unspoken possibilities neither was ready to acknowledge. Finally, Kate nodded and rose to clear the plates, grateful for the simple task that allowed her to regain her composure. As she washed the dishes in a basin of water Lucas had heated on the fire, Kate reflected on her reaction to his words. Why had the thought of parting ways with him caused such a sharp pang of disappointment? She barely knew this man, and yet in the span of 2 days, he had become her lifeline, her protector, and perhaps something more, a glimpse of a different kind of life than the one she had been raised to expect. Lucas, meanwhile, had stepped outside to check on the horses and secure the cabin for the night. When he returned, bringing a gust of cool air with him, his expression was distant, as if he too had been wrestling with unwelcome thoughts. "The bed is yours," he said, nodding toward the small bedroom. "I'll take the chair by the fire." "That's not necessary," Kate protested. "The bed is large enough to share, and you need proper rest after keeping watch all last night." Lucas shook his head firmly. "Not appropriate." "You've had your reputation compromised enough on my account." Kate almost laughed. "I think my reputation was thoroughly destroyed the moment I fled my own wedding, Mr. Blackwood. Propriety seems a bit late to worry about now." "Nevertheless," he insisted, "the chair will do fine for me. I've slept in far worse places." Recognizing the stubbornness in his tone, Kate acquiesced. "At least take one of the blankets from the bed. The nights are cold up here." He accepted this compromise, and they prepared for sleep with the awkward awareness of two people unused to sharing such intimate space. Kate retreated to the small bedroom, changing into the nightgown Emma had provided and braiding her hair for sleep. Despite her exhaustion, sleep proved elusive. The unfamiliar sounds of the cabin, the creaking wood, the wind in the pines, the occasional pop from the fire kept her alert. Through the partially open door, she could see Lucas seated in the chair by the fireplace, his profile illuminated by the dancing flames. He wasn't sleeping either, she realized, but staring into the fire as if it held answers to questions she couldn't guess. Eventually, the rhythm of the wind and the warmth of the cabin lulled her into a fitful sleep. Her dreams a confused jumble of wedding veils, galloping horses, and Bartholomew Winston's cold eyes watching her from every shadow. She woke to pale morning light filtering through the cabin's small window and the smell of coffee brewing. For a moment, disorientation gripped her, until memory reasserted itself: the cabin, the mountains, Lucas. Dressing quickly in the clothes Emma had provided, Kate emerged from the bedroom to find Lucas at the stove, frying bacon in a cast-iron skillet. He looked up at her approach, and the simple domesticity of the moment struck her again with its strange intimacy. "Morning," he greeted her. "Sleep well?" "Well enough," she replied, smoothing her hair self-consciously. Without her usual toiletries, she felt disheveled and unprepared to face the day. "Is there water for washing?" Lucas nodded toward a basin he'd already prepared, set on a small table near the window. "It's cold, I'm afraid. I can heat some if you prefer." "Cold is fine," Kate assured him, grateful for his thoughtfulness. She splashed the bracing water on her face and neck, feeling more awake with each shock of cold. "What's the plan for today?" "First, breakfast," Lucas said practically. "Then I need to scout the area, make sure we weren't followed. After that, we should take inventory of the supplies, see what we need to replenish if we're staying for more than a few days." The mundane nature of these tasks was oddly comforting after the high tension of their escape. Kate ate the simple breakfast with appreciation, then insisted on cleaning up while Lucas prepared for his scouting expedition. "Stay inside while I'm gone," he instructed as he checked his rifle and pistol. "Keep the door barred. I shouldn't be more than a few hours, but if I'm not back by midday—" "You will be," Kate said firmly, not wanting to contemplate the alternative. Lucas gave her a searching look, then nodded. "Just in case, there's another pistol in the drawer by the bed. Do you know how to use it?" "My father taught me the basics," Kate said. Her father, for all his faults, had believed in practical education for his daughters, though I've never fired at anything but targets. Let's hope it stays that way. Lucas hesitated, then added, "Kate, if something happens to me, there's a map in my saddlebag. It shows the way to a ranch owned by a man named Josiah Foster, about 30 miles east of here. He's a former Pinkerton like me. You can trust him." The casual way he discussed the possibility of his death sent a chill through Kate. "Nothing's going to happen to you," she said, more forcefully than she intended. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Your confidence is flattering, but in my line of work, preparing for the worst is just good sense." He buckled on his gun belt and moved toward the door. "Bar this behind me." After he left, Kate secured the door as instructed and set about exploring the cabin more thoroughly. Beyond the main room and bedroom, there was a small storage area accessed through a trapdoor in the floor, containing preserved foods, ammunition, medical supplies, and other necessities for remote living. The cabin's previous owner had been an avid reader, judging by the small collection of books on a shelf near the fireplace, mostly practical guides to wilderness survival, but also a few dog-eared novels and poetry collections. Kate selected a volume of Tennyson's poems and settled in the chair Lucas had slept in, finding comfort in the familiar verses. Time passed slowly without Lucas's presence. Kate found herself listening for every sound outside, tensing at the snap of branches or rustle of leaves. Midday came and went with no sign of his return, and despite her earlier confidence, worry began to gnaw at her. By early afternoon, her anxiety had reached a fever pitch. She paced the small cabin, alternating between peering out the windows and checking the pistol Lucas had shown her. Just as she was considering whether to venture outside against his explicit instructions, she heard the distinctive sound of hoofbeats approaching. Relief flooded her, followed immediately by caution. It could be Lucas returning, but it could also be pursuit. Moving quickly to the bedroom, she retrieved the pistol from the drawer and positioned herself near the window, where she could see the approach to the cabin without being easily spotted. The tension in her shoulders released when she recognized Lucas's form astride his horse. She returned the pistol to its drawer and hurried to unbar the door, greeting him with a smile that reflected more of her relief than she intended to show. "You're late," she said, trying to keep her tone light. "I was beginning to worry." Lucas dismounted, his expression serious. "With good reason. We have company in these mountains." Kate's smile faded. "Winston's men, 3 riders about 5 miles south of here. They're searching methodically, checking every valley and potential shelter." Lucas led his horse to the lean-to and began unsaddling him. "They're not on our trail yet, but it's only a matter of time before they work their way to this valley." "What do we do?" Kate asked, following him outside despite the light rain that had begun to fall. Lucas worked in efficient silence for a moment, caring for his horse before answering. "We have two choices. Either we leave now, try to stay ahead of them, or we prepare to defend this position. Which do you think is better?" He considered the question seriously. "Normally, I'd say move, but the weather's turning. There's a bigger storm coming, and being caught in the open could be as dangerous as facing Winston's men." He glanced at the darkening sky. "Besides, this cabin is defensible, and they don't know for certain we're here. We might be able to wait them out." The decision made, they returned to the cabin and began preparations. Lucas moved supplies from the storage cellar to more accessible locations, checked all his weapons, and showed Kate how to reload the pistol if necessary. They filled every available container with water from the nearby stream and gathered additional firewood, storing it inside to keep it dry. As evening approached, the promised storm arrived in earnest driving rain that soon turned to sleet, hammering against the cabin's roof and windows. The wind howled around the eaves, creating an eerie accompaniment to their quiet preparations. "At least the weather's on our side," Lucas observed as they shared a simple supper of beans and cornbread. "No one will be searching in this. How long will it last?" Kate asked, glancing toward the window where sleet pellets rattled against the glass. "Mountain storms this time of year can last anywhere from hours to days." Lucas stoked the fire, building it higher against the increasing cold. "We have enough supplies to wait it out, whatever happens." The storm continued through the night, growing in intensity until the cabin seemed to shudder with each gust of wind. Kate found sleep impossible, the combination of the storm's fury and the knowledge of pursuers in the mountains keeping her alert and anxious. She emerged from the bedroom well after midnight to find Lucas still awake, seated by the fire with his rifle across his knees. "You should be sleeping," he said without turning. "So should you," she countered, moving to sit in the chair opposite him. "The storm would wake the dead." A small smile touched his lips. True enough. They sat in companionable silence for a while, the fire crackling between them and the storm raging outside. There was an intimacy to the moment that Kate found both unsettling and comforting, two souls sheltering together against the elements and human threats alike. "Lucas," she said finally, "if Winston's men find us here, what happens?" He met her gaze steadily. "I'll do everything in my power to keep you safe." "That's not what I asked." Lucas sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Honestly, I don't know. These men are hired guns. They follow orders for pay, not principle. If they're instructed to bring you back unharmed, that's one thing. But Winston strikes me as a man who'd rather see you dead than with someone else." The blunt assessment sent a chill through Kate that had nothing to do with the storm. "And you, what would they do to you?" "Nothing good," Lucas admitted. "I publicly humiliated one of the most powerful men in the territory. That's not something Winston is likely to forgive." Kate leaned forward, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "Then we should leave at first light, storm or no storm. I won't have your death on my conscience." "My choices are my own," Lucas said firmly. "I knew the risks when I interfered with your wedding. Did you? Did you really think it through, or was it impulse?" The question had been bothering Kate since their escape. Why risk so much for a stranger? Lucas was quiet for a long moment, the firelight playing across his features as he considered his answer. "Partly because of Sarah, yes, but also—" He hesitated, then continued more softly, "because in the 3 brief encounters we had, I saw something in you that reminded me of who I used to be before life hardened me. A kind of hopeful resilience, even in the face of circumstances that should have crushed it." The honesty of his answer caught Kate off guard. "I wasn't feeling particularly resilient or hopeful on my wedding day," she admitted. "No," Lucas agreed. But you were still there, the real Katherine Montgomery, underneath the resignation and duty. I could see it in your eyes when you looked at Winston, in the way you held yourself apart from him even as you prepared to become his wife. His gaze, when it met hers across the fire, was intense. I couldn't bear to watch that light go out. Something shifted between them in that moment, an acknowledgement of feelings that had been building since their first meeting. Kate found herself unable to look away from him, her heart racing with a mixture of fear and exhilaration. "And now," she asked softly, "do you regret your decision?" "Not for a moment," Lucas replied without hesitation. "Whatever happens next, at least you're free to choose your own path." The weight of that freedom settled on Kate's shoulders, a burden and a gift intertwined. "I'm not sure I know how," she confessed. "All my life, my choices have been shaped by duty and circumstance. What my family needed, what society expected. Then perhaps it's time to discover what Katherine Montgomery wants," Lucas suggested. "Not the blacksmith's daughter, not the almost bride of Bartholomew Winston, just Kate." The question hung in the air between them, profound in its simplicity. What did she want? Beyond survival, beyond escape from Winston's reach, what future did she dream of for herself? Before she could formulate an answer, a sharp crack split the air, not thunder, but something else. Lucas was on his feet instantly, rifle in hand, moving to the window with practiced stealth. "What is it?" Kate whispered, her heart pounding. "Not sure," Lucas replied, peering through a gap in the shutters. "Could be a branch breaking under the weight of ice. Or—" He didn't need to finish the thought. They both knew the alternative, that despite the storm, Winston's men might have found them. "Stay away from the windows," Lucas instructed, his voice low and urgent. "Move to the bedroom. There's less exposure there." Kate obeyed, her earlier fatigue forgotten in the rush of fear. Lucas doused the fire, plunging the cabin into darkness broken only by occasional flashes of lightning. In those brief illuminations, she could see him moving with purpose, checking the doors and windows, positioning himself where he could observe the clearing before the cabin without being seen. The minutes stretched endlessly, marked only by the continuing fury of the storm and the hammering of Kate's heart. Then, during a momentary lull in the wind, she heard it, the unmistakable sound of voices, muffled by distance and weather but definitely human. "Lucas," she whispered from the bedroom doorway. "I hear them," he confirmed grimly. "At least 2, maybe 3. "What do we do?" Lucas moved to her side, his face barely visible in the darkness. "We have 2 advantages. They don't know for certain we're here, and they're fighting the storm. If we stay quiet, they might pass us by." But even as he spoke, a beam of light cut through the darkness outside, a lantern, sweeping across the clearing toward the cabin. Whoever was out there, they were conducting a deliberate search, not simply seeking shelter from the storm. "They won't pass us by," Kate said, stating what they both now knew. Lucas's expression hardened. "No. Get your coat and boots. If they force their way in, we'll need to be ready to move." Kate quickly gathered her few possessions while Lucas maintained his watch. The voices outside grew closer, now clearly distinguishable as multiple men arguing about the best approach to the cabin. "Could be anyone in there," one voice said, carried to them on a gust of wind. "Trapper, prospector." "Winston said check every structure," another replied. "And this is the only cabin for miles. In this weather," the first voice complained, "we're more likely to die of exposure than find them." "Check it anyway," a third voice commanded, its tone brooking no argument. "Barton around back, Jenkins with me." Lucas retreated from the window, moving quickly to Kate's side. 3 of them," he confirmed in a whisper. "They're surrounding the cabin. When they knock, don't make a sound." The knock, when it came, was more of a pounding, a fist hammering against the wooden door with authority. "Hello inside." A voice called, "We're seeking shelter from the storm." Lucas and Kate remained motionless in the darkness, scarcely breathing. The pounding came again, more insistent this time. "We know someone's in there," the voice called. "Smoke from the chimneys still visible." "Open up, or we'll break down the door." Lucas pressed the pistol into Kate's hand. "If anything happens to me, head for the trapdoor in the storage area. There's a tunnel that leads to a cave about 50 yards from the cabin. Mackenzie built it as an escape route." "I'm not leaving you," Kate protested, though she accepted the weapon. "Yes, you are," Lucas said firmly. "This isn't your fight." "It became my fight the moment I chose to leave with you," Kate countered. "I won't abandon you now." Before Lucas could argue further, a new sound cut through the storm, the crash of breaking glass as one of the men smashed a window at the rear of the cabin. "That's our answer," the leader outside the front door called. "Break it down." The door shuddered under the impact of a shoulder or boot. Lucas moved swiftly to position himself out of the direct line of the doorway, his rifle raised. "Last chance, Kate," he said urgently. "The tunnel." Kate shook her head, gripping the pistol with determination despite her fear. She had never shot at a person before, wasn't sure she could do so now, but she wouldn't hide while Lucas faced danger alone. The door splintered inward with a final crash, and a figure burst through, lantern in one hand, pistol in the other. In the sudden light, Kate could see he was a large man with a weather-beaten face and cold eyes that scanned the room with professional detachment. "Don't move," Lucas commanded, his rifle aimed squarely at the intruder. "Tell your men to stand down." The man froze, his expression registering surprise followed by calculation. "Blackwood," he acknowledged. "Winston said it might be you." His gaze shifted to Kate, standing partly shielded by the bedroom doorway. "And the Montgomery girl, my lucky day." "Your lucky day will be the one where you walk away from this alive," Lucas replied evenly. "Call off your men, and we can all survive this night." A tense silence followed, broken only by the continuing howl of the wind. Kate could sense the man weighing his options, calculating the odds. Then his eyes flicked to something behind Lucas, and a small, triumphant smile crossed his face. "Drop the rifle, Blackwood," a new voice said from the broken window at the rear. "Or I put a bullet in your back." Lucas didn't move, his aim still steady on the first intruder. "If you shoot me, I'll still get off a shot at your friend here. Nobody wins." "Maybe," the voice from behind conceded, "but the girl's still standing. She'd be easier to take alive if we don't have to shoot through you to get to her." Kate felt a surge of anger at being discussed as if she were merchandise to be delivered. Without fully thinking through her actions, she stepped more fully into view, the pistol in her hand now aimed at the man in the doorway. "I am not going back to Winston," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "Not alive, anyway, so if your plan is to force me, you should know it won't work." The man in the doorway assessed her with new respect. "The boss didn't mention you had spirit, miss." "Might be why he wants you back so badly." "He doesn't want me," Kate replied coldly. "He wants to own me, there's a difference." "Not to me, there ain't," the man shrugged. "I just get paid either way." "And if the pay's not worth your life?" Lucas asked. "Winston's revenge might be valuable to him, but is it worth dying for? Are any of you prepared to die tonight for Bartholomew Winston's wounded pride?" The question hung in the air, given weight by the deadly serious tone in which it was delivered. Kate could see uncertainty creeping into the lead man's eyes, a recalculation of risk versus reward. "Winston's offering $1,000 for the girl," he said, as if testing Lucas. "Alive and unharmed." "And for me?" Lucas asked, a grim smile touching his lips. "For you, he didn't specify condition, just proof." Lucas nodded as if this confirmed something he already knew. And if I offered you the same amount to walk away, to tell Winston you never found us?" The man's eyebrows rose in surprise. "You carrying that kind of money, Blackwood?" "Not on me," Lucas admitted, "but I have it and I can get it to you within a week." "Pretty words don't spend like cash," the man replied, but Kate could hear the wavering in his voice. He was considering it. "I'm a man of my word," Lucas said. "Ask around about Lucas Blackwood. I pay my debts." The standoff continued for several tense heartbeats, neither man lowering their weapon. Finally, the leader spoke again, addressing his unseen companion. "Jenkins, what do you think? Worth the risk of crossing Winston?" From behind Lucas came a considering grunt. $1,000 is $1,000, no matter who pays it. And Winston ain't exactly beloved among the boys. Been shorting wages all spring. "Barton," the leader called, presumably to the third man stationed somewhere outside. "Storm's getting worse," came the reply from beyond the broken door. "Could be we never found this cabin at all, way I see it. Got turned around in the blizzard, had to make camp elsewhere." The leader's eyes narrowed as he studied Lucas. "How do we know you'll pay? We let you go now, what's to stop you from disappearing?" "Like I said, I'm a man of my word," Lucas replied steadily. "But if that's not enough, I'll give you collateral." He reached slowly into his vest pocket with his free hand and withdrew a silver pocket watch. "This was my father's, worth at least $200 on its own. Consider it a down payment." The leader regarded the watch thoughtfully, then made his decision. "Toss it here." Lucas did so, the watch landing at the man's feet. Without taking his eyes off Lucas, the leader bent and retrieved it, examining it briefly before tucking it into his own pocket. "A week," he said firmly. "We'll be at the Broken Spoke Saloon in Hilldale every evening. You don't show with the money by next Saturday, Winston gets a detailed description of this cabin and everything in it." "Fair enough," Lucas agreed. "Now back out slowly, all of you." The leader gestured to his unseen companion, and Kate heard movement behind them as the man at the window withdrew. The leader himself backed carefully through the shattered doorway, his pistol still raised. "1 week, Blackwood," he called from outside. "Don't make me regret this business arrangement." They listened as the sounds of the men's departure faded into the storm. Only when the last hoofbeat had been swallowed by the wind did Lucas lower his rifle, his shoulders sagging slightly with released tension. "Will they keep their word?" Kate asked, her own hands trembling now that the immediate danger had passed. Lucas moved to secure the broken door as best he could with a piece of furniture. "For a week, yes. Men like that value money over loyalty to employers. But we can't stay here now. They know the location." "Where will we go? In this storm?" Kate glanced toward the window where sleet continued to lash against the glass. "We'll wait until first light," Lucas decided. "The storm should ease by then. In the meantime, help me gather only what we absolutely need. We'll travel light and fast." As they worked to prepare for departure, Kate found her mind returning to the confrontation, analyzing it from different angles. "You never intended to kill them, did you?" she asked suddenly. Even though they were Winston's men, Lucas paused in his packing. "No. Killing should always be the last resort, not the first. Men like that, they're just doing a job. They don't deserve to die for following orders, however misguided." "But you would have shot if necessary," Kate observed. "It wasn't a question. To protect you." "Yes." The simple certainty in his voice sent a shiver through her that had nothing to do with the cold. They worked through the remainder of the night, gathering supplies, repairing what they could of the broken door and window to keep out the worst of the weather, and preparing for a journey deeper into the mountains. By the time dawn's gray light began to filter through the clouds, the storm had indeed diminished to a steady, cold rain. "Time to go," Lucas said, handing Kate a heavy coat that had belonged to Mackenzie. It was too large for her, but it would provide much-needed warmth in the mountain chill. "The horses are ready." Kate donned the coat and followed him outside, where their two mounts stood patiently under the lean-to, saddled and laden with their meager possessions. The air was bitingly cold, the ground covered with a treacherous layer of ice and slush. "Where are we heading?" Kate asked as Lucas helped her mount. "Higher up," he replied, swinging into his own saddle. "There's an old mining camp about a day's ride from here. Not comfortable, but it's well hidden and defensible. We can lay low there while I figure out how to get the money to pay off our visitors." As they rode away from the cabin, Kate found herself casting a wistful glance back at the small structure. Brief as their stay had been, the cabin had represented a kind of sanctuary, a place where, for a few days, she had glimpsed what a different life might look like. The terrain grew increasingly difficult as they ascended, the trail sometimes disappearing entirely under ice and snow. Lucas led the way with confidence, finding paths Kate would never have spotted on her own. Despite the cold and the physical discomfort of riding in such conditions, she found herself drawing strength from his steady presence and unwavering determination. By midday, the clouds had begun to break, allowing occasional glimpses of blue sky and even brief moments of sunshine. They paused in a sheltered hollow to rest the horses and eat a cold meal of jerky and hardtack. "The weather's improving," Kate observed, tilting her face to catch a rare beam of sunlight. Lucas nodded, his eyes scanning the slopes around them. "Makes travel easier for us, but also for anyone following. We need to be vigilant." "Do you think they'll keep their word?" "Winston's men." "For now," Lucas replied. $1,000 is significant money to men like that, but if Winston offers more or if they decide I can't be trusted to pay. He left the thought unfinished. They continued their journey through the afternoon, the landscape growing more rugged and wild with each mile. Kate, despite her fatigue and the constant awareness of danger, found herself moved by the austere beauty of the mountains, the towering pines, the glimpses of distant peaks, the occasional flash of wildlife. As the day waned, Lucas led them into a narrow ravine that twisted between towering rock walls. At its end, partially concealed by a stand of scrubby pines, stood the remains of what had once been a small mining operation, a dilapidated cabin, a collapsed mine entrance, and the rusted remnants of equipment. "Not much to look at," Lucas acknowledged as they dismounted, "but it served me well as a hiding place before. The cabin's sturdier than it appears, and the location makes it almost impossible to approach without being seen." The interior of the miner's cabin was indeed in better condition than its exterior suggested. Though dusty and sparse, it offered solid walls, a sound roof, and a functional fireplace. Lucas quickly got a fire going while Kate arranged their supplies and laid out the bedrolls. As night fell, bringing with it a bone-deep cold, they huddled near the fire, sharing a simple meal of beans and dried fruit. The events of the past days, the wedding, the escape, the confrontation with Winston's men seemed to have created a bond between them that transcended their brief acquaintance. "Tell me about your life before all this," Kate said, breaking a comfortable silence. "Before the Pinkertons, before Sarah." "Who were you then?" Lucas looked surprised by the question, then thoughtful. "Younger," he said finally with a small smile. "More idealistic, certainly. I grew up in Illinois, son of a school teacher and a cabinet maker, relatively sheltered until the war came." "You fought for the Union," Kate recalled. "With Charles Carson." Lucas nodded. "Enlisted at 18, full of patriotic fervor and completely unprepared for the reality of war. Met Charlie in our unit. He saved my life at Shiloh, and I saved his at Gettysburg. By the time it ended, I was 22 and felt 100 years old." Is that when you joined the Pinkertons? Not immediately. Tried to go home first, take up my father's trade, but I couldn't settle. The war changes you in ways that make ordinary life seem insufficient somehow. He poked at the fire, sending sparks upward. The Pinkertons offered purpose, a chance to use the skills I'd learned in a way that seemed meaningful. And was it meaningful? Lucas considered the question seriously. Sometimes. When we protected people who needed protection, pursued criminals who deserved justice, yes. But over time, the agency changed. More and more, we were hired to break strikes, intimidate workers, protect the interests of the wealthy against the needs of the many. His expression darkened. After Sarah, I couldn't justify it anymore. Kate listened, fascinated by this glimpse into a life so different from her sheltered existence in Willow Creek. And now, what gives your life meaning now, honestly? Lucas met her gaze across the fire. I've been asking myself that same question for the past 2 years. The work I do tracking men like Winston, gathering evidence of their crimes, it's necessary. But is it enough? He shook his head slightly. I'm not sure anymore. The vulnerability in his admission touched Kate deeply. I understand that feeling, she said softly, of wondering if the path you're on is the right one, if there's something more waiting if you only knew where to look. And what would you look for, Kate Montgomery, if you could choose any path? Lucas asked, his voice gentle. The question caught her off guard, though it echoed their conversation from the previous night. What did she want? Beyond simple survival and escape from Winston, I think, she said slowly. I'd want to use my education. Before my mother fell ill, I trained as a teacher. I completed the course, but never took a position because my family needed me at home. The admission of this long-buried dream felt both liberating and painful. I love learning, and I love sharing that with others, especially children. You'd make an excellent teacher, Lucas said with genuine admiration. The patience you've shown on this journey, your quick mind, your compassion, those are valuable qualities in someone shaping young minds. His faith in her abilities warmed Kate more than the fire before them. Perhaps someday, she said, when this is over. It will be over, Lucas assured her. One way or another, Winston isn't all-powerful despite what the people of Willow Creek believe. They talked long into the night, sharing stories and aspirations. The danger that surrounded them temporarily held at bay by the simple human connection of two people learning each other's hearts. When Kate finally retired to her bedroll, she felt a curious mix of emotions: fear for what lay ahead, certainly, but also a growing hope and something else, something she wasn't quite ready to name. The next few days fell into a pattern. They remained at the mining cabin, venturing out only for necessities: water from a nearby spring, firewood, occasional hunting for fresh meat to supplement their dwindling supplies. Lucas set snares and taught Kate how to clean and prepare the rabbits they caught, skills she had never imagined needing but now embraced with practical determination. Through it all, their connection deepened. In the enforced intimacy of their situation, they discovered shared values, complementary strengths, and a mutual respect that grew with each passing day. Lucas revealed himself to be not just brave and resourceful, but also thoughtful, well-read, and possessed of a dry humor that emerged when he felt most at ease. Kate, in turn, found herself shedding the constraints of propriety and social expectation, revealing a practicality, intelligence, and quiet courage that surprised even herself. On the 4th day of their stay at the mining cabin, Lucas announced his intention to make the journey to Hilldale alone to meet Winston's men and pay them as promised. Absolutely not, Kate protested when he outlined his plan over breakfast. It's too dangerous. Winston could have men watching the town. "Which is why you need to stay here," Lucas explained patiently. "I can move faster and less conspicuously alone, and the men are expecting me, not you. And if it's a trap, if they've already told Winston about our arrangement, then I don't lead them back to you," Lucas said simply. "That's why you'll stay here with provisions and the map to Josiah Foster's ranch. If I'm not back in 3 days, you go to him." The thought of Lucas facing such danger alone and of potentially being left to navigate the wilderness by herself filled Kate with dread. But she recognized the logic in his plan, however much she disliked it. 3 days, she agreed reluctantly. Not a minute longer. Lucas prepared to leave the following morning, packing only what he absolutely needed for the journey to Hilldale and back. The money he had mentioned came from a hidden compartment in his saddle, a substantial sum that represented, Kate realized, most if not all of his savings. As he prepared his horse in the pale light of dawn, Kate stood nearby, her arms wrapped around herself against the morning chill and the fear she was trying not to show. "Remember," Lucas said as he mounted, 3 days. If I'm not back, Foster's ranch," Kate finished for him. "I know. But you will be back." Lucas looked down at her, his expression softening. "I'll do my best," he promised. "And Kate, thank you for your trust, your courage. Whatever happens next, knowing you has been—" He paused, seeming to search for the right words. "It's been a privilege," he finished simply. Before Kate could respond, he urged his horse forward, heading down the narrow trail that led away from the mining camp. She watched until he disappeared from view, then returned to the cabin, her heart heavy with unspoken words and growing fears. The hours of that first day stretched endlessly. Kate occupied herself with practical tasks, organizing their supplies, mending tears in her clothing, gathering more firewood. As night fell, she found the silence of the cabin oppressive, the absence of Lucas's steady presence leaving a void that nothing could fill. She slept fitfully, waking at every sound, imagining footsteps or voices that weren't there. By morning, her nerves were raw, her body tired from lack of proper rest. The second day passed much like the first, a blur of waiting and worry punctuated by necessary chores. On the morning of the third day, Kate found herself standing outside the cabin at first light, scanning the trail for any sign of movement. The deadline she and Lucas had agreed upon loomed large in her mind. If he didn't return by nightfall, she would be forced to accept that something had gone wrong and make her own way to Josiah Foster's ranch. The thought of leaving without knowing Lucas's fate was almost unbearable. Over the past week, he had become more important to her than she had believed possible in such a short time. His absence now felt like a physical ache, a constant awareness of something vital missing from her world. As the day wore on without sign of him, Kate began reluctant preparations for departure. She studied the map Lucas had left, committing the route to memory as best she could. She packed only essential supplies, as he had instructed, keeping the load light enough for her horse to carry with ease. By late afternoon, with the sun beginning its descent toward the western peaks, Kate's hope had begun to fade. She stood outside the cabin, her gaze fixed on the trail, willing Lucas to appear. The shadows lengthened, the temperature dropped, and still she waited, unable to accept what her mind was telling her, that it was time to go, that Lucas wasn't coming back. Just as she had finally turned to go inside and complete her preparations, a sound caught her attention, the distant but unmistakable rhythm of hoofbeats. Kate froze, listening intently, her heart pounding. It could be Winston's men, having extracted Lucas's location before. She couldn't complete the thought. Instead, she moved quickly to retrieve the rifle Lucas had left for her, positioning herself where she could observe the trail while remaining partially concealed. The hoofbeats grew louder, and then a rider emerged from the trees, a single rider on a familiar chestnut horse. Even at a distance, Kate recognized Lucas's broad-shouldered silhouette, the distinctive way he sat in the saddle. Relief surged through her with such force that her knees nearly buckled. She set aside the rifle and moved into the open, waving to catch his attention. As he approached, she could see that he looked tired but unharmed, his expression brightening when he spotted her. "You're late," she called as he drew closer, trying to mask her overwhelming relief with a lightness she didn't feel. Lucas dismounted with a weary smile. "Ran into some weather coming back," he explained. "Creek was running high, had to find another crossing." He led his horse toward the lean-to, then paused, studying her face. "You were worried." It wasn't a question, but Kate answered anyway. "Of course I was worried, I thought." She swallowed hard. "I thought you might not come back." Lucas's expression softened. "I made a promise, Kate. I don't break those lightly." They moved together to care for his horse, the familiar routine helping to calm Kate's still racing heart. As they worked, Lucas explained what had happened in Hilldale. The men were waiting at the saloon, as agreed. Transaction went smoothly enough they seemed relieved to have an alternative to reporting back to Winston empty-handed. He unsaddled his horse, lifting the heavy tack with practiced ease. But Winston himself was in town, staying at the hotel. I had to be careful not to be seen. "Did you learn anything about my family?" Kate asked, the question that had been weighing on her mind since their flight from Willow Creek. Lucas nodded, his expression growing serious. "Your father and sisters have left town. According to rumors in Hilldale, they departed suddenly 3 days after the wedding, destination unknown." "And my mother," Kate pressed, anxiety sharpening her voice. "With them, apparently. Charlie must have reached them with our message." Lucas's hand came to rest on her shoulder, a reassuring weight. "It's good news, Kate. Winston can't use them to get to you if he can't find them." Kate absorbed this information, relief mingling with a new concern. "But they've lost everything, their home, my father's business." "They have their lives and their freedom," Lucas pointed out gently. "And they have whatever funds Charlie provided from my saddlebag. It's a start." They finished tending to the horse and returned to the cabin, where Kate prepared a simple meal while Lucas washed away the dust of travel. As they ate, Lucas shared more of what he had learned in town, rumors about Winston's rage at being jilted, speculation about where Kate might have fled, gossip about the land baron's increasingly erratic behavior. "His grip on the county is weakening," Lucas observed. "Without his air of invincibility, people are beginning to question his authority. Some of the smaller ranchers are talking about banding together against him." "And us?" Kate asked. "What do we do now?" Lucas considered the question, his expression thoughtful. "Winston's men are satisfied for the moment, but that won't last. And Winston himself won't stop looking for you for us so easily." He met her gaze across the table. "I think it's time we left the territory entirely, at least for a while." "Where would we go?" The question held more weight than its simple words suggested. It wasn't just about destination, but about what would become of them together or apart. "I have connections in San Francisco," Lucas said carefully. "People who could help you establish yourself there. The city is growing rapidly, always in need of educated women to teach in its schools." "And you?" Kate asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Where would you go?" Lucas hesitated, and in that pause, Kate read his intention to see her safely settled, then return to his solitary path, his mission of justice. The thought sent a pain through her chest so acute it nearly took her breath away. "I haven't decided," he said finally. "There's still work to be done regarding Winston, evidence to be gathered and presented to the proper authorities." "I see," Kate said, fighting to keep her voice steady. So you would deliver me to San Francisco like a package, then return to risk your life continuing this vendetta against Winston. Lucas looked startled by her characterization. It's not a vendetta, Kate. It's justice. Men like Winston prey on the vulnerable because they believe themselves untouchable. Someone has to hold them accountable. And it has to be you. Kate challenged, her emotions getting the better of her careful restraint. Always you, alone against the world. Who else? Lucas countered, a rare flash of frustration crossing his features. I have the skills, the experience, the connections, and I don't have. He stopped abruptly. Don't have what? Kate pressed. Attachments. People who care what happens to you. Is that what you were going to say? The tension between them crackled like the fire in the hearth. Months of unspoken feelings compressed into this single, charged moment. Kate, Lucas said, his voice gentler now. The life I lead isn't one I would ask anyone to share. It's dangerous, uncertain, often lonely. You deserve better stability, security, a chance to build the life you've dreamed of. And if what I dream of has changed, Kate asked softly. If what I want now is different from what I thought I wanted before. Lucas stood and moved to the fireplace, his back to her as he stoked the flames. When he finally turned to face her again, his expression was carefully controlled. What are you saying, Kate? She rose as well, gathering her courage to speak the truth that had been growing in her heart since that day on the church steps. I'm saying that I don't want to be delivered to San Francisco like a parcel and left there while you return to your solitary crusade. I'm saying that these past days, despite the danger and uncertainty, have shown me what it means to truly live, not just exist. She took a step toward him, her eyes never leaving his. I'm saying that I care what happens to you, Lucas Blackwood, and the thought of you facing Winston's wrath alone terrifies me more than anything we've encountered together. Lucas remained motionless, his face a study in conflicting emotions. Kate, you don't know what you're asking. The path I walk, I'm not asking to walk your path, Kate interrupted. I'm asking you to consider that perhaps there's a new path we could forge together, one that includes justice but also. She faltered, then pressed on. But also love, companionship, a shared purpose. The word love hung in the air between them, impossible to take back, impossible to ignore. Lucas's expression softened, vulnerability replacing caution in his eyes. I've been alone so long, he said quietly. After Sarah, I told myself it was better that way, safer for everyone. And now? Kate asked, taking another step toward him. Now I find myself wondering if perhaps I've been a coward, using my mission as an excuse to avoid the risk of caring too deeply again. His voice was low, almost a whisper. Because I do care for you, Kate. More than I thought possible in such a short time. The admission, simple and profound, broke something loose inside Kate. She closed the remaining distance between them, reaching up to touch his face with gentle fingers. Then maybe it's time for both of us to be brave in a new way, she suggested. Not just in facing external dangers, but in facing the risk of opening our hearts. For a moment, Lucas remained still under her touch, and Kate feared she had pushed too far, too fast. Then his hand came up to cover hers, warm and strong, and the last of the barriers between them crumbled. I can't promise it will be easy, he warned, his voice rough with emotion. Or safe or predictable. Kate smiled, feeling lighter than she had in years. I'm not asking for easy. I'm asking for real. The kiss, when it finally came, was gentle at first, a question, an offering. But as Kate responded, it deepened into something more profound, a promise and a commitment that transcended words. In that moment, all the dangers that surrounded them seemed distant and unimportant compared to the certainty growing between them. When they finally parted, Lucas rested his forehead against hers, his breath mingling with her own. "So," he said softly, "San Francisco." "San Francisco," Kate agreed, "but together, and not forever, just until Winston's power is broken and it's safe to return." "Together," Lucas repeated, as if testing the word. "I think I could get used to that." The decision made, they spent the evening planning their journey west. The route would be challenging across mountains and desert, through territories where law was often a flexible concept. But with Lucas's experience and Kate's determination, both felt confident in their ability to reach California safely. They would leave at first light, abandoning the mining cabin for the last time. Whatever lay ahead, dangers, obstacles, uncertainties, they would face it as partners. Their separate paths now merged into a shared journey. As they prepared for sleep that night, Kate found herself filled with a curious mixture of excitement and peace. For the first time since her mother's illness had thrown her family into chaos, she felt that she was moving towards something, not just away from something else. The future stretching before her was unknown but full of possibility, all the more precious, because it would be shared with someone who saw her for who she truly was and valued her for it. The dawn broke clear and cold over the mountains, the sky a brilliant blue that promised fair weather for their departure. Kate and Lucas worked together with the efficiency of people who had learned each other's rhythms, packing their few possessions, saddling the horses, ensuring nothing useful was left behind. As Lucas helped Kate mount her bay mare, their eyes met and held, a current of understanding passing between them that needed no words. Whatever challenges lay ahead on the long road to San Francisco, they would face them together, drawing strength from the bond that had formed between them in these wild mountains. With one last look at the mining cabin that had sheltered them, they turned their horses westward, toward the distant promise of a new beginning. The trail ahead was uncertain, but as Kate glanced at Lucas riding beside her, his profile strong against the morning light, she knew with absolute certainty that she had made the right choice, not just in fleeing her wedding to Bartholomew Winston, but in opening her heart to the unexpected love that had found her in the aftermath. The path they had chosen would not be easy. There would be hardships, dangers, moments of doubt. But there would also be joy, discovery, and the profound satisfaction of building a life on their own terms, a life founded on mutual respect, shared purpose, and the kind of love that transforms rather than diminishes. As they rode side by side into the future they had chosen together, Kate remembered Lucas's words from that first day of their flight. There's always a choice. In choosing each other, they had claimed a freedom more profound than mere escape, the freedom to create a life of meaning, of connection, of genuine partnership. And in that choice, Katherine Montgomery had finally found the path that was truly her own. 5 years later, San Francisco, California, the schoolroom was alive with the controlled chaos of children gathering their books and wrapping up at the end of the day. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows, illuminating the colorful maps and student artwork that adorned the walls. "Remember, your history essays are due on Monday," Kate Blackwood called over the cheerful din. 2 pages minimum, and yes, Thomas, proper spelling counts." A collective groan rose from several of the boys, causing Kate to hide a smile. At 23, she had found her calling in this sunlit classroom in one of San Francisco's rapidly growing neighborhoods. The school served a diverse population, the children of merchants and laborers, immigrants from China and Europe, families who had come west seeking opportunity, just as she and Lucas had. As the last student filed out with a cheerful "Goodbye, Mrs. Blackwood," Kate began tidying her desk, organizing papers and putting away books with the efficiency of someone who loved order, but had learned to embrace a certain amount of creative chaos. The sound of boots in the hallway made her look up, a smile spreading across her face as Lucas appeared in the doorway. At 33, he had retained the lean strength and watchful demeanor of his Pinkerton days, but the hardness that had once defined his expression had softened. He leaned against the doorframe, watching her with undisguised affection. "How was your day, Mrs. Blackwood?" he asked, using the title that still gave Kate a thrill of pleasure after 3 years of marriage. "Productive," she replied, moving around the desk to greet him with a quick kiss. "The older children are preparing for their examinations, and the younger ones finally mastered their multiplication tables. And yours?" "Interesting," Lucas said, taking her hand as they left the classroom together. Josiah's telegram arrived. "It seems our friend Bartholomew Winston has finally received his comeuppance." Kate stopped on the school steps, turning to face him. "They've arrested him." Lucas nodded, satisfaction evident in his expression. "The evidence we gathered, combined with testimonies from those he defrauded, was enough. The territorial governor couldn't ignore it any longer, especially after the Denver newspapers took up the story. The news represented the culmination of years of patient work gathering documents, collecting witness statements, building a case against the man who had once seemed untouchable. Even from San Francisco, Lucas had continued his investigation, corresponding with allies in Colorado, gradually assembling the proof needed to bring Winston to justice. "So it's over," Kate said softly. "Truly over. It seems so." Lucas offered his arm, and they continued down the steps to the busy street. "Which means, if you're still interested, we could consider returning to Colorado. Your family has been settled in Denver for some time now, and your father's forge is doing well. And Josiah mentions that Willow Creek is in need of a school teacher." The possibility hung in the air between them, a return to the place where their story had begun, but under vastly different circumstances. No longer fugitives but respected professionals, no longer running from danger but moving toward a future of their own choosing. "What about you?" Kate asked. "Your work with the shipping company." Lucas had found his own place in San Francisco, working as a security consultant for one of the major shipping firms that connected California to the world. The position utilized his investigative skills and attention to detail, while providing the stability neither had expected to find so satisfying. "They'd be sorry to lose me," he acknowledged, "but there are opportunities in Denver too. The railroads are expanding, always in need of men with my background." He glanced down at her, his expression serious. "The decision is yours, Kate. I'm content wherever you are." Kate considered the possibility as they walked toward their modest but comfortable home in a quiet neighborhood near the bay. San Francisco had been good to them, a place of new beginnings, of establishing themselves not as people fleeing a past, but as individuals building a future. Yet Colorado still called to her, the mountains and open spaces a part of her soul in a way the busy city could never be. "I think," she said slowly, "that it might be time to go home, not to reclaim what was, but to create something new in a place that shaped us." Lucas's arm tightened around hers, his smile warming his blue eyes. "Then home it is." As they turned onto their street, Kate's hand moved unconsciously to her abdomen, where the first subtle signs of new life had recently made themselves known. She hadn't told Lucas yet, wanting to be certain before sharing news that would change their lives once again. But now, with the chapter of Winston finally closing and a new beginning on the horizon, the time felt right. "There's something else," she said, pausing at the gate to their small front garden. "Something that makes the timing of this decision particularly appropriate. Lucas looked at her questioningly, and Kate took his hand, guiding it to rest against her still flat stomach. His expression shifted from confusion to dawning comprehension, and finally to a joy so profound it brought tears to Kate's eyes. "Are you certain?" he asked, his voice hushed with wonder. Kate nodded, her own joy mirroring his. "The doctor confirmed it yesterday. By Christmas, there will be 3 of us." Lucas gathered her into his arms, holding her as if she were the most precious thing in the world. "I never imagined," he murmured against her hair. "When I interrupted your wedding that day, I never dreamed that we'd find this." Kate finished for him, leaning back to meet his gaze. "A life together, a family of our own, any of it," Lucas admitted. "I was so certain my path had to be walked alone. You taught me otherwise." They stood together in the golden California light, on the threshold of yet another new beginning. The journey from that fateful day in Willow Creek had been neither straight nor easy, but every step had led them here to a love built on choice and courage, on mutual respect and shared purpose. As Lucas bent to kiss her, Kate reflected that the greatest adventure of all had not been their flight through the mountains or their journey to San Francisco, but the daily choice to build a life together, to face whatever came their way not as rescuer and rescued but as true partners. "She's coming with me," Lucas had said that day on the church steps, offering her a choice when she'd believed she had none. Neither of them could have imagined then where that choice would lead to a love that had transformed them both, and to the family they were now beginning to create. As they walked hand in hand into their home, the future stretched before them, not a predetermined path, but one they would forge together, step by step, choice by choice, in the freedom they had claimed for themselves that day in the wild Colorado mountains.